Hey guys, it's Vince. Today in this video, we are going to be looking at a different topic. It's something that I've been thinking about doing for some time, and why not now? We are going to be reviewing the online videos dealing with vendors supporting their clients through videos to spot the nuts. Because of course, many of these content creators, as well as yourselves, are intending to do things correctly. However, if you're provided misinformation, regardless of the source, then it needs to be corrected, and we need to look at why that's happening. And again, many of you already know why it's happening. It's happening because, of course, vendors are either overseas or they're a direct manufacturer with no engineering experience and don't understand the outside forces that they're working with this equipment. So rather than go through boredom of actually just seeing me talk, we're going to jump right in and we'll take a peek at what's going on.
Firstly, unpacking the package, which contains the stepper motor driver and the manual. Open the manual and read the instructions before use.
All right, that's pretty basic instructions. Naturally, you're going to remove whatever driver is in the box. You're naturally going to take out any literature that's provided. And of course, they're stating to read the instructions prior to use. Now, I find as a vendor, most end users read the instructions not prior to use typically, but as they're assembling their system. That's when they find their literature to be the most beneficial. Now, the thing is this. If you're not preparing yourself ahead of time and you're doing it on the fly, so to speak, where you're actually going to go in and start reading that documentation as you're assembling the system, usually what ends up happening mentally is people become in a rush. And when they become in a rush, it usually will be more towards the fact, I want to assemble the system and that's really all I care about. Well, guys, I'm telling you right now, that's not what the goal is. The goal is not just general assembly. It's going to be assembling the chassis with the mindset of, I'm trying to do everything correctly. If we are not doing things correctly, we are going to have a tremendous amount of issues. Remember, wiring patterns are just that. It's a pattern. Many of you, including many of the content creators in my Fail series, get the wiring patterns right. What they get wrong is all of the critical other material dealing with leading up to the wiring pattern that is just as, if not more essential. Meaning, what cables do I use? Do I use the proper double shielded cables? Do I use ferrites? Do I use EMI filters if required? What am I working with as far as my robot? These are things you all must consider prior to, once again, making this initial purchase on the drives and dealing with, once again, the vendors.
Paying attention to the driver wiring diagram and the connection method.
All right, guys. Now, you immediately notice, and this is what always comes up, is that I hear clients or even potential clients tell me, well, this is what the vendor of this component says. And again, it's a bit misleading because when we hear about vendors claiming wiring pattern / terminal lead hookups, once again, what they are typically covering is the base level connections. They're not going to go into the engineering portion of the system. And that's why this genre is as difficult for most end users as it is, especially the novices that are coming over into this field, seeing that there is great potential for whatever products they want to produce. Unfortunately, if they go to develop a controller without understanding the outside forces they're working with and just go by these vendors, they're essentially sabotaged. And once again, we hear it right here in this video. And again, StepperOnline we know is coming from overseas. The big thing is this. Manufacturers typically are not having engineers cover the general engineering of the controller. So these details must be covered by all end users prior to just thinking about connections. That's what these vendors want you to believe. And that's why many end users find that their system is unstable after going through the build process, simply following these wiring patterns. So keep that in mind as you build your system. Nothing is simple when it comes to engineering. Always keep that in mind. Whenever you go online, and whether it be a vendor, content creator, whoever it is, and they try to make engineering sound like it's just this, that, and the other thing, the attention to detail is what will dictate what the outcome is. So if you're trying to develop a production robot, you having that attention to detail will mitigate most problems right from the beginning.
Prepare the motor, drive, and controller so you can start connecting. Connect the motor to the drive, noting that the colors of the wires correspond to A plus A, B plus B.
So naturally the vendor is just covering the general hookup of the drive to the motor. Now the thing to keep in mind as a novice end user is you have other components that are going to be involved in the system, and before you connect anything with the driver itself, the vendor never discusses, and this is the most irritating thing with these type of videos, is the vendor never talks about checking all of the other components prior to connecting the drive. Why do we check other components? Because I've said this in previous videos, what it's going to do is eliminate any possibility of issues in the circuitry loop of the controller. Because once again, once you go to test all those components together, if there is a problem, you're not going to know there's a problem until it's assembled, and that becomes a complete hassle. Then you've got to track everything down, and we start going backwards to figure out what exactly is wrong. And I cannot emphasize enough how many times clients will say to me, hey, you know, I built this using such and such components, and I need to go back and figure out what's wrong. And to me, when I hear that, it confuses me, because it's like, well, you built the system. Shouldn't you have checked these components prior to going through and assembling the system? Again, it's a question that comes up constantly. The main thing I want you guys to think about is this, and we see this in a lot of these content creator videos. They'll sit there and build a controller outside of their electrical enclosure and say they're testing. That is not testing. Testing is taking each individual component first, the power supply, the breakout board, all of the components as individual subcomponents of a full system, testing them separately, checking everything off, making sure everything works as it should, and then assembling them in the circuitry loop for the controller. That is the proper way to assemble your CNC controller, so that by the time you get to this step, where the stepper driver or whatever driver you're using is connected to the motors, everything has been validated, and you know if an issue arises, it's only going to be with that particular component, and you've eliminated everything else in that circuitry loop. This is best practice. This is never discussed, because seldom do these end users, or once again vendors / manufacturers, want to cover this in the engineering detail required, and that will save you a ton of headache and going back and trial and error everything should you get the system assembled at a finalized degree.
There are many kinds of controllers. We recommend using Arduino small programmable modules as controllers. His tutorial file and related information can be found at www.arduino.cc.
This is why, guys, I'm doing these videos. The misinformation now has gotten really out of hand. If you hear some thunder in the background, I apologize. It's storming by me right now. Again, the misinformation we're seeing in this genre is, you know, borderline when it comes to safety, and then we deal with just complete utter garbage like we're seeing here. What's more disturbing is this is a manufacturer / vendor of components. StepperOnline, many guys use. I hear about it all the time. Your prices, why are they so different than StepperOnline? Well, it's because I'm vetted in the sense that I actually know what I'm talking about. You can check it out right here. I tell you guys, do your own research, do due diligence. I'm going to post on screen direct from Arduino's forum And I tell you guys, be careful of forums, but I'm going to post it direct from their forum so you can see for yourself that USB, namely the Arduino that they're recommending, has been known to disconnect like every other USB or universal serial bus controller. Why is that? Because USB is completely unstable with voltage spikes and grounding issues for CNC production applications. That being said, once again, I'll state it again, I do not recommend using forums because you do not know who you're learning from. Okay, most forum users are not going to have the following or validation that's required in this genre to be accountable to anything they're telling you. So why would you listen to them? It makes no sense to me logically. However, I'm also going to post from Reddit, which if you're going to be on a forum, Reddit is usually the most vetted because, again, the people on that forum seem to be more educated. Not that, once again, I recommend you taking everything as a biblical term, but what you need to understand is you are looking at consistency. And when everybody is saying the same thing and saying, well, you know, I'm getting a disconnect error too. Well, it's kind of funny, it all driven around USB. If we keep looking at this, once again, Balzas, lead engineer at CNC Drive, I just put that on the screen of the email that me and him were going back and forth in conversation. They produced the UC100, which is the leading USB motion controller everyone has heard of. If you've just gotten into CNC, you probably heard that name somewhere. And that is where, once again, all of the issues began arising. And it's interesting because the vendors know or should know that these problems exist. He certainly knew. Now, why would StepperOnline recommend you to use an Arduino when they should know this? And this is why I keep saying, why would you guys support a company that's literally putting out the wrong information? Makes no sense to me. You have people in the US that are validated, 100,000+ subs, got well over 1.6 million in sales on eBay with perfect feedback telling you this is not the way to go. These units, once again, will always lead to problems, and I've never seen them not. And the scariest part, like you're reading in these forum posts, is that it happens randomly. So there is no way to detect, hey, I've eliminated the problem with using a new cable or using ferrites or, you know, I've regrounded the machine. It doesn't mean anything. Universal serial bus is inherently unstable for production robots, period. If you're using a plotter, if you're using a laser cutter, something very, very minute when it comes to power draw, typically you're okay. When you're using a router or a plasma cutter, God forbid, you are setting yourself up for failure.
We used a simple Arduino example program, which you can find in the Help Center article. Can you send me a schematic that how to wire the stepper driver to an Arduino?
Well, I think you guys all should know, if you don't already, why would this company be pushing you, like many others, whether they be content creators or so on and so forth, why would they be pushing you to use an Arduino? Not just the fact that we've openly seen online, as well as on the forum for the Arduino itself, that these units are unstable, telling us that it would really not be logical to say that this company does not know USB is unstable. But what I want to point out is most of the time, and this is most likely definitely the case with this company, the reason they want you guys to work with the Arduino or similar boards is because they feel that these boards are cheap. And that's really what it all boils down to. If they can project to you how cheap it is to get these controllers somewhat assembled to where you get motion for whatever project you're trying to do, that's where the unscrupulous side comes into play. It's not about engineering to them. It's about projecting to you, the end user out there, through marketing like this, showing, wow, I can use an Arduino, and it's coming from StepperOnline. So then you go and purchase that Arduino, and guess what? There's no accountability. You're not going to contact StepperOnline and be like, well, you told me to do this, and now I'm left with a paperweight. It doesn't happen like that. And that's why I'm telling you guys, understanding marketing and understanding what you're working with is easy to do when you do your due diligence and look for the same pattern. Look online and see how many guys are using an Arduino or USB for that matter without any issues. All you got to do is open up a Google search and type in USB unstable for CNC use. You can do that with any topic, and it'll give you a consensus of what's out there, whether it be in a forum, whether it be online. These topics cannot be avoided if you're serious about saving yourself the headache and money in purchasing something incorrectly. And let me tell you what, the majority of my clients, the majority, find me after they've already spent money with someone else, and they're like, you know what, I've watched your videos and they're terrific, and you've saved me a bunch of money in the sense that I'm not moving forward purchasing something else from someone else. So think about what I'm telling you. And like I said, do your due diligence. I'm inviting you to do it. I want you to do it, because you will come back and you will figure it out, hopefully before you spend any more money on these happenstance type equipment that these vendors try to put out there. And we see this time and time again. Anything in this industry for CNC production robots that they know will aid you in producing a manufacturing facility, whether it be small or large, they understand what potential you have to make money. Don't believe for a minute that you're going to ever get something that cheap that is not substantiated by what you're able to produce. And I say that all the time. You want proof of that? Let's look at it. Vectric software, based in the UK, you look at their Cut 2D program. It starts at about $150. You go up to VCarve, then there's VCarve Pro, and you'll see the price progressively getting larger. It would be ignorant of anyone to believe that as your capability increases, not just with software, but with hardware, the same thing happens. Do you think as an engineer that I don't know if you buy a 5-axis system from me that your production is going to go up, your capabilities are going to go up in the right hands? I would be a fool not to charge more for that. And I do charge more for that. And I'm telling you that as I'm sitting here because you should know that. You should be aware that the robots I produce in the right hands will make you a substantial amount of money if you know what you're doing. Ignorance to the field doesn't dictate lack of capability of the robot that's being produced. So remember that. Just because you buy the high-end system, I see this all the time. Well, I'm buying this system. Have you ever run a mill before? No, I haven't. Well, you can go out and spend, as much money as you'd like. You buy a Haas. It doesn't mean anything. The guy that understands that Haas, and he could be the same user, same age, same everything, same height, same weight. The only difference is he has more capability and knowledge of using that machine. He's going to produce more. And that means he's going to be more successful if he understands marketing. And if he doesn't, he's going to hire someone that understands marketing. If he doesn't understand all the variables that go with that machine, he's smart enough to say, hey, you know what? I'll hire who I have to get this running, and the next thing I know, he's in full production. Where the other guy may sit there and say, well, I want to learn everything. Okay, well, then you better be willing to take the time to learn everything. And most people fail when it comes to that. They will allocate the right amount of time in certain areas. They might get overwhelmed, which most likely they will because there's a ton of variables we're working with. And when that happens, that's when they fail, and that's when everything kind of crashes. And those are the people you usually see on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, so on and so forth, selling their machine ultra cheap, telling you, hey, it's like new, and this, that, and the other thing. And meanwhile, that's where that all was driven from. Okay, no one sells manufacturing equipment, once again, cheap unless they're bailing out. Something is not right. When you see things that are ridiculously cheap in this industry, and I'll say it again, there is a reason. Whether it be Arduinos, whether it be because the machine is at an auction for automation components, look in depth of what you're looking at. If we're seeing a 70, 80% decrease in price, or compared to normal market value with an Arduino, for instance, you're seeing that a controller costs between that 70 or 80% difference. You already know or should know and be aware and be intelligent enough to say something here is not right. Well, I hope many of you out there are going to leave a comment on what you're seeing done incorrectly before I discuss it. Let's see how many comments there'll be. Hopefully you left it. If you look carefully at the terminal block wiring, and once again, I want to state this is a manufacturer / vendor of CNC automation components. We have 2 leads being inserted inside of a single terminal block position. This is incorrect, gentlemen. How this should have been wired, if it's done correctly and you understand electronics and the components that support them, is you would have used what's known as a dual position for rule. And that for rule will allow 2 leads, and I'll put it on screen so you know exactly what I'm talking about, to be inserted into it, and it has 1 insert position for being put inside of the terminal block. Now, what blows my mind, it should blow yours as well, is once again, this is a manufacturer of CNC automation components, and this is a tutorial video, once again, showing what they claim to be best practice, and no, what they're actually showing, and what many of these videos show, and I'm sure you're catching on and you're picking up what I'm putting down, is they want to show you the fastest way to connect things so they can be, once again, not held accountable to you not having motion. To them, as long as your motors are spinning, you're done. To the content creators, most of them, that's what that means. The truth of the matter is that's not the case. And if you're that ignorant, you're going to get burned. But overall, now you know how this should be done. The real question you should be asking yourself is, really, how is it they're able to sell components this cheap? Now you know why. Because all of the information regarding their components and what they're putting out, if you were to watch this video, they would essentially have you do things, what's being done in this video, and 90% of it is done incorrectly, aside from you following their wiring pattern, as discussed previously.
Pay attention to the choice of signal voltage. The signal voltage of Arduino is usually 5 volts.
So everyone should know by now, and if you don't, we'll cover it because it's a question that does come up quite a bit. Any voltage under 10 volts is going to be the most susceptible to EMI. I like to stay in that 12 volt range because that's typically what we see now. You know, I mean, realistically, most of the breakout boards that are on the higher end are going to be using, 12 volts or above. Most of the base level boards use 5 volts, but when you're working with a 5 volt board, those are the voltages that are most susceptible. 10 volts or under, and again, lower voltages means more signal corruption and how electromagnetic interference is going to play a huge role in that. So you have to understand, and again, these vendors have to understand, and manufacturers should be projecting to their end users, hey, guess what? You better pay attention to this, because if you don't, you could have the best hardware. These could be totally quality drives. We don't know, but I can tell you this, it doesn't mean anything if the engineering is done poorly. And that's where I think that there's a misconception, and you'll notice, or you should notice, back in the 90s, we used to see PC videos being made. A lot of, even now, you'll see gaming computer videos being made where guys buy all the parts, they look really cool, they dress the boxes up, and then they assemble these units. And I can't tell you how many past potential clients I've had tell me that they've had gaming computer experience and try to translate it into this. And it's really interesting to think that's a lot of what we're seeing here. These manufacturing vendors of these components try to project how easy this is. Yet it's so amazing to me how vastly different most end users' results are. And that should tell you something. And that's why I do tell you, most of you guys, if you're going to use a form, use it for what you should. Look for a pattern. And that's what I tell you, search the pattern. The pattern doesn't lie. When you see more and more and more posts of people having problems with their systems, then you just start looking at why. Grounding is probably the #1 question I get asked constantly. It has never been covered in this video at all. So Think about that. Isn't that odd? They're supposed to be an expert. I mean, they're manufacturing CNC components for automation. Once again, I'll state the obvious. Yet, we haven't covered that. YouTube is not designed to pick that up. In the future, they will, I'm sure. And this will be filtered to their end users, making the community a stronger place. I've said it before, but unfortunately, at this point, what we're seeing is just a culmination of connect lead here to here, and you're good. And I can't tell you how many guys end up purchasing a robot because it fits their budget, or components in this matter, and then they assemble it or get it home and say, oh, I'm having this, I can cut for this amount of time, but then I have problems. And all of a sudden, then it becomes prevalent that, oh my God, maybe he's right. There's engineering that's involved. They start making changes. How much is it going to be to change this part? How much is it going to be to change that part? Well, by the time you're done, you would have been better to just invest in the system with me the first time. And I've done this so many times. I can't tell you how many past clients of mine have told me that. And that's exactly where most of you are at. If you can't afford to work with me, and I'm getting told that all the time, the fact of the matter is you save. If you're not willing to save, then you accept this. If you accept this, then you're not a victim. You're only a victim if you're not doing your due diligence and looking at this from the perspective that nothing, again, I've said it before, is that easy. Engineering is not easy. You're dealing with unseen forces. You need to understand all the principles around this equipment, not just for safety, but for stability. And most of these vendors, I personally believe they don't get it. I mean, let's look at what we're seeing here. We're seeing a video made by a manufacturer with an AI voice. I mean, many of you may not know this if you don't have a YouTube channel, but AI right now is being tracked by YouTube. They will ask you as you post a video, if you're using AI in any format, you could see right here it's being used. If they really understood what they were doing, they would have an engineer there describing firsthand what's going on. First of all, the video would get more views. And secondly, you can see here that it would be a more trusted video. But it blows my mind how many people look at this, once again, see these type of videos being made, and yet they always then are acting surprised when they don't get the end result that they're expecting. And it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, we look online, or we should be looking online at higher end systems, and you wonder why the prices are so high, and these guys always think that they can outbuild the pros. And realistically, they should be saying, well, why is this price so much higher? Is it just because there's a markup? Or could it be maybe that there's actual engineering involved? They're paying the proper engineers to make their system stable, and therefore that's why that system is that much higher. I mean, how many guys out there can build a car but don't build a Lamborghini? I mean, let's be real. Yeah, you might build a car, but is the engineering there where it should be to take it to the next level where it's a professional vehicle? There is a huge difference, and hopefully these type of videos will enlighten you.
Check the motor current value, which is available on the drawing and also on the model number. Set the appropriate gear level according to the motor current. The drive can be adapted to motors with different current values. For more information about current setting, please refer to this article, How to Set the Current on Stepper Driver, IMS or Peak. The link is in the comment section.
You'll always want to go by your peak current.
The drive can be adjusted to control the speed and smoothness of operation by setting the interpolation according to your needs. We recommend the commonly used interpolation 1600.
Notice how they're not covering the resolution, and that's what they're discussing here. Again, it's up to the end user to figure that out.
Supply voltage, we can refer to this table. Finally, please note that before switching on the power, please check again to make sure that all wiring is intact. Then the stepper motor will move as you want.
And that is where the video ends, because that is all this video was intended to do, is produce motion to take their accountability, as I discussed, away. Okay, guys, that wraps up another video. And once again, I want to thank you all for your support. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback about these videos. I will keep them coming. There's enough of these videos out there to keep me busy for quite some time. And the last piece of advice I would give to all of you, as I've stated many, many times before, is take your time and do your due diligence. Check everything, believe nothing, and follow qualified sources, guys. Be very careful with your money. Take care.